Anger has ended empires. It has shattered marriages, severed friendships, and buried careers beneath the rubble of a single unguarded moment. Right now, neuroscience confirms the average person experiences anger-driven impulses 17 times per day. 17 fractures in your reason. 17 moments where you are no longer the pilot of your own life. By the end of this, I will reveal the precise mental exercise Marcus Aurelius performed in silence before confronting every crisis. We will move through 3 territories tonight. First, we will examine why anger is not a feeling, but a philosophical catastrophe, and why you are likely misdiagnosing it entirely. Second, we will descend into the Stoic architecture of the mind that Marcus Aurelius built over decades. Third, we will forge practical weapons from that philosophy. But the real revelation, the exercise itself, waits at the very end. Consider what anger actually costs. Not the abstract cost, the specific one. The father who screamed at his son on a Tuesday morning and watched something irreplaceable leave the boy's eyes. The executive who fired a colleague in fury and later realized he had incinerated the one person who was honest with him. These are not melodramatic examples. They are the quiet tragedies replicated millions of times every single day across the civilized world. Marcus Aurelius was not born composed. This is the foundational misunderstanding most people carry. He was born into the violent theater of Roman imperial politics, raised amid intrigue, flanked by war on 3 fronts simultaneously: the Parthian east, the Germanic north, plague consuming his army. He had every reason to explode. He had every justification the world would have accepted. Instead, he chose a different architecture for his inner life. The wound that anger opens is this: it makes you believe your reaction is caused by the external world. Someone insults you, and you feel the heat rise in your chest, and your entire nervous system signals that the insult is the cause. But Marcus Aurelius wrote in his private journals, the texts we now call the Meditations, something that cuts through that illusion with surgical precision. You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength. But here is what that famous line conceals. Marcus did not simply believe this in the abstract. He trained it. Every morning, before the Roman Senate convened, before generals arrived with casualty reports, before petitioners lined the marble corridors, he would sit in deliberate stillness and rehearse the day's adversity in his mind. He called this premeditatio malorum, the premeditation of evils. He knew anger was always an ambush, and so he scouted the terrain before the ambush arrived. What the modern world sells as anger management is largely theatrical. Count to 10, take deep breaths, walk away. These are the psychological equivalent of placing a bandage over a fractured bone. They address the symptom while leaving the pathology untouched. Marcus understood something deeper. Anger is never about the event. Anger is always a verdict, a judgment your mind renders when reality dares to contradict your expectations. Remove the false expectation, and the fuel for anger vanishes. His mentor, Epictetus, a former enslaved man who built perhaps the most rigorous philosophy of self-governance the ancient world ever produced, gave Marcus the central instrument, the dichotomy of control. There are things within your power, your judgments, your desires, your decisions.
There are things outside your power, the behavior of others, the timing of fate, the cruelty of circumstance. Anger, Epictetus argued, is always the result of confusing these two categories. It is a philosophical error dressed as an emotion.
The Stoics called this confusion a passion, not in the romantic sense, but in its original Greek meaning, pathos, a disturbance, a cloud over the faculty of reason. And they were radical enough to say this: the disturbance is never forced upon you. It is always adopted. The man who strikes you cannot produce anger inside your skull. What he can do is present a stimulus. What you do with that stimulus, the judgment you attach to it, that is yours alone. That judgment is the actual battlefield. Here, the philosophy becomes almost unbearable in its demands, because it is far more comfortable to assign the source of our fury to the external world, to the colleague who undermined us, the partner who dismissed us, the stranger who humiliated us publicly. The Stoic position strips that comfort away entirely. It says, the fire is yours. You built it. You maintain it. And therefore, with sufficient discipline and practice, you can refuse to light it. This is not forgiveness. This is something harder and more powerful.
But here's where the story takes an unexpected turn. The most sophisticated insight Marcus Aurelius offered on anger is not about suppression. It is about anatomy. In Meditations, Book 11, he wrote something that modern cognitive behavioral therapy would rediscover 17 centuries later. When you wake up in the morning, tell yourself, the people I deal with today will be meddling, ungrateful, arrogant, dishonest, jealous, and surly. This is not pessimism. This is inoculation.
This passage, read carelessly, appears cynical. Read carefully, it is a masterwork of emotional engineering. By expecting human failure, Marcus was not becoming bitter. He was removing the ingredient that transforms disappointment into rage, surprise. Anger is always amplified by the sense that something should not have happened. The Stoic morning practice destroys that amplification before the day begins. You cannot be ambushed by what you have already anticipated and accepted as part of the landscape of human life. There is a second instrument, equally powerful, which Marcus calls the view from above. In moments of rising agitation, he trained himself to mentally ascend, to see the argument, the insult, the crisis, from an imaginary height. From that perspective, every human conflict that felt enormous and personal revealed itself as brief, provincial, and ultimately insignificant against the vast indifference of time. The person who enraged you will be dust within a century. So will you. This is not morbid. This is liberating. Marcus employed a third practice he called sympathia, the understanding that every human being, including the one who provokes your anger, is operating from within the limits of their own reason, their own wounds, their own inherited philosophy. In Book 6 of the Meditations, he wrote, "Whenever you are about to find fault with someone, ask yourself the following question: what fault of mine closely resembles the one I am about to criticize?" The mirror turned inward extinguishes the fire aimed outward. Now enter the concept the Stoics called the hegemonikon, the ruling faculty, the command center of the soul, located neither in the gut nor the heart, but in the rational mind. For Marcus and Chrysippus before him, the hegemonikon was the throne of the self.
Anger was not an enemy to be fought. It was a usurper attempting to occupy that throne. The entire discipline of Stoic practice was a campaign to keep the throne occupied by reason rather than passion. Not once, every day, every hour.
Seneca, Marcus's philosophical predecessor, writing roughly a century earlier, devoted an entire treatise to this subject, De Ira, on anger. And his central claim was this: no man becomes angry by choice. It is a weakness, and like all weaknesses, it has the texture of necessity only to those who have never trained against it. Seneca himself was not an innocent here. He struggled with anger throughout his life, which made his analysis not academic, but clinical, the diagnosis of a man examining his own pathology.
Wait. What comes next is what few truly understand. Most people who encounter Stoicism take from it a passive doctrine. Endure, suppress, bear it silently. This is a profound misreading. Marcus Aurelius was one of the most powerful men in the recorded history of civilization. He commanded armies. He executed traitors. He made decisions that altered millions of lives. Stoic anger management was not about becoming passive. It was about ensuring that decisive action, when taken, was guided by reason rather than wounded ego.
This distinction is everything. The man who acts from anger acts to relieve his own pain. The man who acts from reason acts to solve the actual problem. Marcus governed an empire for nearly 2 decades, navigating betrayal, military catastrophe, the death of children, and the exhaustion of endless war. And he governed it with a composure that his contemporaries found almost inhuman. Not because he felt nothing, but because he had built a structure inside himself that processed feeling before translating it into action. So how do you build this structure? The first practical instrument is what we might call the pause protocol. The moment you feel anger rising, that familiar tightening in the jaw, that narrowing of thought, you insert a deliberate gap. Not 10 seconds of counting, a specific cognitive act. You name what is happening. My judgment is classifying this event as an injustice. Not, this is an injustice. The distinction is everything. One is a fact about the world. The other is a fact about your perception of the world. The second instrument is what Marcus called the stripping exercise. When something provokes your anger, you strip it of every narrative layer and describe it in purely physical, factual terms. Not, he insulted me publicly and humiliated me. Instead, vibrations moved through air. My nervous system registered sound. My mind interpreted meaning and assigned value. The fury lives in the interpretation, the story you graft onto the raw event. Strip the story. The anger loses its scaffolding and collapses. Third instrument, the role clarification. Marcus returned to this repeatedly. He wrote, "Loss is nothing else but change, and change is nature's delight." When a person's behavior enrages you, ask precisely, what role did I assign this person? What expectations did I construct around them? Anger at others is almost always anger at the contract they never signed. You assigned them a role, reliable, loyal, fair, rational, and your fury is directed at their failure to honor an agreement they were never party to. Fourth instrument, and perhaps the most demanding, the compassion inversion.
When you are at peak anger toward another human being, you force yourself to construct the most sympathetic possible account of their behavior. Not to excuse them, not to absolve them, but to understand the degree to which their harmful action was produced by their own blindness, fear, or philosophical poverty. Marcus wrote, "People are not evil, they are mistaken." This single reframing transforms the relationship between you and your anger fundamentally.
Fifth instrument, the temporal displacement. This requires a kind of psychological courage most people avoid. You ask yourself, with complete honesty, in 10 years, will this matter? Not as a dismissal, but as a genuine recalibration of scale. Marcus was watching soldiers die by the thousands. He was presiding over the greatest plague to strike Rome in centuries, the Antonine Plague of 165 AD, which may have claimed 5 million lives. From that vantage point, the petty irritations of daily life are recontextualized with ruthless clarity. Now we arrive at a story. The year is 175 AD. Marcus Aurelius is on campaign on the Danube frontier, commanding Roman legions against Germanic tribes in brutal winter conditions. He learns that his most trusted general, Avidius Cassius, the man he had empowered more than any other military figure in the empire, has declared himself emperor and seized control of the eastern provinces. The betrayal is total, calculated, and deeply personal. By any standard of the ancient world, an explosion of imperial fury was not just understandable, it was expected. What Marcus Aurelius did next was recorded by the historian Cassius Dio. He did not issue an immediate order for Cassius's execution. He did not strip his family of rights in a fury. He convened his officers and spoke to them with a composure that seemed, to those present, almost impossible given the magnitude of the wound. He said, and these words have survived, that he pitied Cassius for the mistake he had made, and that he hoped to resolve the rebellion without further Roman bloodshed. He meant it. He was not performing. Before Marcus could confront Cassius directly, the rebel general was killed by his own soldiers. When the severed head was sent to Marcus as a trophy of imperial loyalty, he refused to look at it. He ordered it buried with dignity. He pardoned Cassius's family. He issued no purge of the general's supporters in the eastern provinces. His biographers record that he spent considerable private time in written reflection, not raging, not strategizing revenge, but examining his own role in having elevated a man who held such ambitions. He turned the mirror inward. This was not weakness. Rome's enemies watched closely. What they observed was a man who, at the apex of power, chose precision over passion. The message sent to the entire empire was more powerful than any execution could have been. This emperor's mind cannot be hijacked. His enemies could not provoke him into a spiral of purges that would destabilize the state. His allies could not manipulate him through flattery into careless decision-making. He was, in the most literal sense, ungovernable by his own emotions. That composure was his greatest military asset. The Meditations, those private journals, never intended for publication, were written almost entirely during campaigns, in military tents, at night, after days of governing catastrophe. They are not a philosophy textbook. They are a man's daily combat record against his own worst impulses. Entry after entry shows Marcus reminding himself of the same principles because he kept needing the reminder.
This is the most important thing the journals tell us. Mastery over anger is not a state you arrive at. It is a practice you return to daily for the rest of your life.
Before every significant confrontation, Marcus Aurelius performed a specific mental ritual. He called to mind the logos, the rational principle he believed governed the universe, and he consciously aligned his judgment with it rather than with his wounded pride. He asked 3 questions. Is my reading of this event accurate? Is my proposed response proportionate to the actual harm, not the imagined one? Will this response serve Rome, meaning something larger than myself, or merely serve my ego? These 3 questions were the gate through which no unexamined fury could pass.
This is the technique, not abstract, not metaphorical. 3 questions: accuracy, proportion, purpose, inserted into the gap between stimulus and response. You practice this in the minor irritations of your week so that it becomes automatic when the major crisis arrives. Tomorrow morning, when something provokes you before 9 a.m., and something will, do not count, do not breathe. Ask, is this reading accurate? Is this response proportionate? Does this serve something beyond my injured pride? The gate opens, or it holds. That choice is the entirety of Stoic anger mastery.
Marcus Aurelius died in 180 AD on campaign near Vienna, still commanding, still governing, still writing. What he left behind was not a monument of marble, but a private record of a man fighting the same internal war we all fight, and choosing, daily, to be more than his worst impulse. The technique is now yours. 3 questions, 1 gate. The pause that separates the animal from the philosopher. The real question is not whether you will practice it when the moment arrives and everything in you is screaming not to.